On vacation with my daughter-in-law's family, I heard them say useless old man they never imagined who had paid for everything. So I decided to do something they never imagined and would change their lives forever. The sound was a constant, a rhythmic beating that enveloped the house. The soft thud, sometimes furious, sometimes a whisper, of the Mediterranean waves against the cliffs. A sound that throughout the entire week had been the soundtrack of a happiness that I, Arturo, 78 years old, believed genuine. Now that same sound felt different. It was no longer relaxing. It was the roll of a drum, announcing the end of the mask, the beat that accompanied the slow and painful crumbling of an illusion. It was 4 in the afternoon, on a scorching Thursday in August. The air, heavy and saline, poured in through the enormous open windows of the villa. From my wicker chair, in a semi-hidden corner of the shaded terrace, I had the perfect panoramic view. The infinity pool, of a turquoise blue that seemed painted, merged on the horizon with the sea. The sun played with the water's reflections, creating blinding flashes that danced over the whitewashed wall of the house. The house, Villa Las Gaviotas, a pretentious name for an even more ostentatious reality. 3 floors, modern and pure lines, with enormous windows that seemed to want to devour the landscape. Everything was white, beige, and light wood, a luxury magazine set that I had paid for, in its entirety. Each tile, each drop of chlorine in the pool, each bottle of wine from the well-stocked cellar, each bite of the exquisite food we had enjoyed. I had paid for everything. I did it for Laura, my daughter-in-law, for her and for my son Javier, although he always found it difficult to accept my help. "Dad, it's too much," he told me when I showed him the bank transfer confirming payment of the rental for these 2 weeks. "We want normal vacations, not this." But Laura, with her wide smile and bright eyes, hugged me and said, "Arturo, you're a sunshine. It will be incredible. Imagine the children." And I imagined it. I imagined my 2 grandchildren, Lucas, 8 years old, and Martina, 5, running around that dream house, happy. I imagined meals all together, laughter, walks on the beach at sunset. I imagined being part, truly part, of that family that had been becoming alien to me over the years, since Elisa, my wife, my love, my everything, left 5 years ago, leaving me with a silence in my soul that I still have not managed to fill. That's why I did it. To break that silence. To literally buy a little piece of their happiness and be able to immerse myself in it, even if only for a few days. To feel useful, necessary. The provider grandfather. The generous grandfather. And for 6 days it worked. Or I, in my naivety, believed it worked. The mornings were for the beach. I would sit under the umbrella, watching. Javier and Laura played with the children at the water's edge. Martina's laughter, sharp like little bells, mixed with Lucas's excited shouts. I smiled, recording each moment in memory, as if each one were a fragile treasure. Javier would sometimes approach, lie down next to me on the towel and say, "Are you okay, Dad? Aren't you bored?" And I, with a knot of emotion in my throat, would respond, "I'm perfect, son, perfect." The afternoons were like this, like now, silence and heat. The children, exhausted, slept their siesta in their rooms upstairs, with the air conditioning creating a bubble of coolness. Javier had gone to the nearby town to buy tobacco and the newspaper. Laura and her mother, Clara, were in the kitchen, preparing a salad for dinner. I had taken refuge on the terrace, in my chair, with a book on my lap that I couldn't manage to read. I preferred to observe and listen. The hum of their voices reached me, muffled, a feminine murmur that mixed with the clash of plates and cutlery. Clara, my son's mother-in-law, a woman my age, but who insisted on pretending to be 10 years younger, always impeccable, even at 4 in the afternoon in a beach house. She wore a vaporous dress, lilac-colored, and her sandals had a small wedge. Her hair, dyed an unconvincing ash blonde, was perfectly arranged. She was kind to me, but with a protocol kindness, distant, as if my presence were a necessary formality to enjoy the vacation that, without her knowing it, I was financing. Laura had attributed everything to Javier. Javi had a spectacular bonus, she had announced, and I, cowardly, did not deny the white lie that my daughter-in-law had woven to avoid hurting her mother's pride, who had always looked at Javier with a certain disdain for not earning as much as she considered her daughter deserved. The murmur from the kitchen intensified. I stopped hearing the clash of plates, only their voices. I couldn't distinguish the words, but the tone was one of confidence, of those intimate conversations that happen when you think no one is listening. I settled into the chair, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the breeze caress my face. I breathed deeply, feeling the smell of salt and jasmine that climbed the walls. For a moment, everything was peace. And then Clara's tone changed. It became sharper, charged with an exasperation that pierced through the open kitchen window glass and reached my ears with brutal clarity. It's just that I don't know how you stand it, Laura. Really. Him on the beach, still, him in the house, always reading or looking at the sea. He's like just another piece of furniture. And on top of that, with that persistent cough, that's pitiful. My body tensed. The cough. The damn morning cough. A gift from my years smoking, that I try to stifle with tissues, so as not to bother. I sharpened my hearing, every muscle on alert. My breathing held. Laura's voice responded, lower, trying to appease. I couldn't hear her well, but Clara didn't give in. No, daughter, no. He's a burden, and Javier constantly worried about him. Are you okay, Dad? Do you need anything, Dad? The imitation was cruel, caricaturesque. He spends the day worried about the useless old man, instead of being with you with his children. It's exhausting, a hindrance. Useless old man. The two words fell on me not like a blow, but like an icy liquid that slowly poured down my neck, ran down my back, and settled in the bottom of my stomach, solidifying into a slab of ice. The outside world, the sound of waves, the song of seagulls, the whisper of wind, suddenly went silent, submerged in a dull and sharp buzz that filled my ears. Useless old man. My hands, which rested on the book, involuntarily clenched. The joints, aching and knotted, turned white from the force with which I gripped the pages. I noticed each beat of my heart, which from slow and measured that it was, suddenly accelerated, hammering my chest with a violence that left me breathless. A cold sweat, foreign to the ambient heat, pearled my forehead. A hindrance? A burden? I looked around, my eyes clouded by a film of unshed moisture. The pool that I paid for, the terrace that I paid for, the glass of half-full lemonade on the teak table, made with lemons from the tree that I paid for, the hammock where Lucas swung in the afternoons, that I paid for. Everything was mine, and I was a hindrance in it. The conversation continued in the kitchen. Oblivious to the earthquake they had provoked, Clara continued talking, now with a more pitying tone. And the poor thing, yes, of course, he's been alone since his wife died, but he can't expect your life to revolve around him. Javier has his own family. He should be in a residence, with people his age, where they take care of him. A residence. The end of the road. The warehouse where useless old men are stored, so they don't get in the way. A wave of heat rose up my neck, burning my ears. The rage, first slow then ferocious, began to melt the ice in my stomach. It wasn't an explosive rage, but a dark, dense and bitter thing that coiled in my entrails. How dare she, how dare that woman, in my house with the food I paid for on her plate, say that? And Laura, what was Laura saying? I forced myself to listen, to sharpen my hearing above the roar of blood in my temples. My daughter-in-law's voice, finally, rose enough. She sounded uncomfortable, trying to be conciliatory. Mom, please, lower your voice. It's not that bad. Arturo is a sweetheart, and the children adore him. A slight glimmer of hope, tiny, lit up in me. Laura. She was defending me. But Clara was relentless. The children adore anyone who brings them candy. That doesn't change the fact that he's a burden. Look, daughter, I know it hurts to hear it, but it's the truth. Javier will never tell you, because he loves him, but I'm telling you for your own good. That old man is stealing time, energy from you, and money, surely, with what it must cost to maintain him. There it was, the crux of everything. Money, always money. For Clara, a person's value was measured by their bank account and their immediate utility, and I, in her eyes, had ceased to have both. The pain was now physical. An invisible fist gripped my sternum, squeezing hard. I breathed deeply, but the air didn't reach my lungs. I was left with suspended breath, looking at the sea that stretched, infinite and indifferent, in front of me. I felt small, as insignificant as a grain of sand on that immense beach. Useless old man. The words echoed in my head, over and over, like a cursed echo that overlapped with the sound of the waves. I closed my eyes and saw Elisa's face, her calm smile, her eyes full of a goodness that Clara would never know. Hold on, Arturo. The wind seemed to whisper to me. Hold on for us. But us no longer existed. Only I existed, alone, ridiculous and pathetic, in a wicker chair, listening to how they dissected my life and my value with the coldness with which one comments on the weather. I heard footsteps. Quick, light. I dried my eyes with the back of my hand with a brusque movement, and pretended to read my book. Laura came out to the terrace, with a tense smile painted on her face. She wore an apron over her beach dress. Her eyes, however, were not smiling. They seemed restless, ashamed. Arturo, do you need anything? More lemonade, she asked, her voice a tone higher than normal, forcing naturalness. I shook my head, unable to trust my voice. I feared that if I opened my mouth, only a moan would come out, an animal sound of pain. Okay, well, if you want, I'll put the TV on inside, eh? Or, I don't know. She stood there, playing with the edge of the apron. She knew she had heard something. Or at least, she sensed it. The complicity with her mother made her feel guilty, but not enough to confront her, not enough to tell the truth. Finally, since I said nothing, she turned around and went back to the kitchen. The door closed behind her. I wouldn't hear any more. The show was over. The useless old man had been conveniently ignored again. And then, something broke inside me. It wasn't an explosion, but a dry and definitive click, like the bolt of a door that closes forever. The rage, the humiliation, the sorrow compressed into a compact and cold ball of terrifying lucidity. I no longer felt pain, only a glacial calm, empty, terrible. They never imagined who had paid for everything, so I decided. The word formed in my mind with absolute clarity. I was no longer a confused and hurt old man. I was Arturo Montenegro, the man who had built an empire from nothing, who had fought against crises, against ruthless competitors, who had raised a son alone after being widowed, the man who never had let himself be trampled. They didn't know it. For them, I was just that, an old man. They didn't see the wolf behind the dimmed eyes, the strategist behind the facade of a good-natured grandfather. They had underestimated the enemy by thinking he was already defeated. I got up from the chair. My legs at first trembled, but quickly steadied. I walked with a determination I hadn't felt in years toward the long sliding glass doors that gave onto the living room. My reflection gave me back the image of a tall man, still lean, with perfectly combed white hair, A pressed beige linen shirt, khaki pants, an elegant old man, a useless old man. I entered the house. The contrast of the terrace heat with the coolness of the air conditioning made my skin crawl. The living room was spacious, with high ceilings, furnished with a minimalist taste that I had approved and paid for. Everything was light and space and silence. Only the slight hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I walked, slowly, my steps silent, on the thick jute rug. I headed not to the kitchen, but to the small study next to the entrance hall, a small room, with a desk, a bookshelf, and a safe built into the wall, discreet, painted the same white color as the wall. From the kitchen, their voices came again. Now they talked about something else, about the salad, about the dressing, about how expensive avocado was in the town. Life continued, trivial and superficial, for them. I opened the safe. The combination was Javier's birth date. Inside, documents, the spare passport, some cash, and a thick folder, brown leather. I took it out. It weighed in my hands. It contained all the truth they ignored. I held it against my chest for a moment, feeling the weight of what I was going to do. Then, I left the study and headed toward the kitchen. I stopped in the doorway. They had their backs to me. Clara cutting tomatoes with surgical precision, Laura stirring a bowl with the dressing. The scene was domestic, warm, a picture of family harmony. I was going to destroy it, and for the first time in a long time, I felt not an ounce of remorse. "Clara," I said. My voice sounded strange in the kitchen silence. It wasn't the trembling voice of the grandfather. It was a deep, firm voice. The voice I used in board meetings when I was going to fire someone. Both women turned around in unison. Laura dropped the wooden spoon in the bowl with a dull thud. Clara held the knife in the air, frozen. Their expressions were a study in surprise. Clara recovered her composure first, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Arturo, dear, was something wrong? Are you feeling okay? You've gone pale." I ignored her false concern. I advanced a step into the kitchen. The hydraulic tile floor was cold under my bare feet. "I heard your conversation," I said, keeping my voice deliberately calm, flat. There was no accusation in it, just a fact. Clara's face contorted. A drop of sweat appeared on her temple. Despite the air conditioning, Laura paled even more, if possible. Her hands began to tremble. What conversation, Arturo?" Laura stammered. We weren't. "I heard," I repeated, cutting her off. "Every word from the terrace. Sound travels in a peculiar way in this house." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. I looked directly at Clara. "You called me useless old man. You said I was a burden. A hindrance, that I should be in a residence, that I steal time and money from your daughter and my son." Clara opened her mouth, then closed it. The knife, still in her hand, slowly lowered. Her thin lips pressed into a hard line. The mask of kindness vanished, revealing the contempt that had always been there. "Well, Arturo," she said, and her tone was now cold, cutting. "If you heard, you heard. I'm not going to apologize for telling the truth. We all think it. I just have the courage to say it out loud. Javier is exhausted from taking care of you. Laura deserves a life, not to be worried about her father-in-law." "Mom, please," Laura whimpered, covering her face with her hands. "Shut up." "No, daughter. Enough pretending. He wanted it himself." Clara looked at me with defiance. "It's hard, I know, but it's reality. At his age, you have to know how to step aside." I looked at her, at this woman who thought she was so intelligent, so in control of the situation, and for the first time, I smiled. Not a kind smile, but a slow, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes and made Clara step back, disconcerted. "Reality," I repeated softly. You don't know reality, Clara. I lifted the folder I held against my chest and let it fall on the white marble countertop with a dry thud that resonated like a shot in the silent room. The noise made them both shudder. "What is that?" Clara asked, with disdain, although a shadow of doubt appeared in her eyes. "Reality," I replied. "Open the folder, Clara. Read reality." Laura, with clumsy movements, as if she were in a dream, approached the counter. Her trembling fingers untied the ribbon that closed the folder. Clara remained firm, with crossed arms, but her gaze was fixed on the documents that Laura was beginning to take out. "It's the villa rental contract," Laura murmured, reading the first page. Her eyes opened like saucers. "Signed by you, Arturo. The payment, the deposit, everything in your name." Clara said nothing. Her face began to lose color. Laura continued turning pages. Her breathing became choppy. "And the rental car invoice, in your name. The supermarket shopping from last week. The corporate card. It's yours. The boat excursion. The advance payment. Arturo." "What?" "Continue," I ordered, my voice soft as silk, but cutting like a razor. She obeyed, hypnotized. She took out more papers, bills, bank transfers, receipts. Her hand stopped on one in particular, a bank statement. She held it. Her eyes scanned the figures, the transaction description. The color completely left her face. A hand flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered. "Oh my God, no." "What? What is it?" Clara snorted. Unable to contain herself any longer, she snatched the paper from her daughter's hands. I simply observed how Clara's eyes, those eyes full of superiority, scanned the transaction line, how they widened, how disbelief painted itself in them, followed by a growing absolute horror. Her jaw dropped. The paper began to tremble in her hands. "It can't be," she gasped. And for the first time, her voice sounded broken, small. It's an error." "It's not an error," I said calmly. 6 months ago, the down payment for the premises of your new boutique in Salamanca, the one you're so proud of, the one that, according to you, had been such a profitable investment, thanks to your cunning." I paused, letting each word drive its sting. 180,000 euros, Clara, paid in a single installment, from my account to yours. The silence that followed was total, crushing. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of the sea could be heard. Clara kept looking at the paper, over and over, as if the figures could change by magic. Laura leaned against the counter, as if her legs were failing her. Tears ran silently down her cheeks. "You," Clara managed to stammer, finally raising her gaze to me. Her eyes no longer showed contempt, but pure terror. "You paid. Why? Why did you do that?" "For Javier," I replied, without taking my gaze off her. "For Laura. Because my son asked me for help. He told me you were in trouble, that you had invested your savings badly, that you had debts up to your neck, and that the boutique was your last shot, your dream. Javier couldn't help you. Not with that amount. I breathed deeply. He asked me not to say anything, to give it to you as an anonymous loan, through a front man, so as not to hurt your pride. A pride that, from what I see, is as great as your ingratitude." Clara let out a moan. The paper fell from her hands and floated to the floor. She staggered, grabbing the edge of the counter to keep from falling. Her breathing was a superficial panting. She was no longer the impeccable and self-assured woman. She was a defeated, unmasked, grotesque woman. "My God," Laura whimpered, covering her face with her hands. "Javi, he knew, and I didn't." "You didn't know anything," I confirmed. "Nobody knew, except Javier and me, and the manager. It was a secret, a gift, or so I thought." I approached one more step, Now I was mere centimeters from Clara. I could see every pore of her parchment-like skin, every strand of mascara that had run with the sweat of her panic. The smell of her expensive perfume suddenly became nauseating to me. "So Clara," I said, and my voice, for the first time, showed the edge of my rage, a steel edge. "Tell me again, who is the useless old man? Who is the burden? Who steals money from this family?" She couldn't answer. She only emitted a guttural, choked sound and looked away, fixing it on the floor, on the paper that lay at her feet, like a mute accusation. The tension in the kitchen was so thick it could be cut with the knife that still rested on the cutting board. Laura cried silently, torn between loyalty to her mother and monumental shame. Clara was on the verge of collapse, sunk in the most absolute of humiliations. And then we heard the noise. The screech of tires on the entrance gravel, a car door slamming shut. Javier had returned. Clara's eyes met mine for an instant. In hers there was only panic, a mute plea. Laura straightened, terrified. "Dad, please," Laura begged, her voice a thread of voice. Don't tell Javi anything, please." The front door opened. We heard his footsteps in the entrance hall. "Hello, I'm back." His voice sang, cheerful, carefree, completely ignorant of the emotional tsunami in the kitchen. "I brought ice cream." He was approaching. His footsteps echoed in the hallway. I looked at Laura, at her pleading eyes. I looked at Clara, at her changed face, at her shattered pride. I looked at the folder on the counter, full of evidence of my generosity and their pettiness. And I knew in that instant that the silence had ended, that the lie was over. Javier appeared in the kitchen doorway, with a wide smile and a plastic bag in his hand. His smile froze instantly upon capturing the scene, his wife crying, his mother-in-law on the verge of fainting, me standing, with an expression he hadn't seen on my face in decades. What's happening here?" he asked, his voice full of genuine and alarmed confusion. "Are you all okay? Has something happened?" We all remained silent. The air was charged with the weight of truth about to explode. Javier looked at Laura, who shook her head, unable to speak. He looked at Clara, who seemed to want to melt into the wall. Finally, his gaze rested on me, seeking an explanation, comfort, the usual serenity in his father's eyes. I held his gaze. I breathed deeply, feeling the bitter taste of disappointment and the poisonous sweetness of revenge on my tongue. And then, with a calm that resonated like thunder in the silent room, I told him, "Yes, son, something has happened. Sit down. We need to talk." The silence that followed my words was more eloquent than any scream. Javier's cheerful, "I brought ice cream," still seemed to float in the poisoned air of the kitchen, a grotesque echo of a normalcy that had been shattered forever. Javier didn't sit down. He remained petrified in the doorway, the plastic bag with the ice cream hanging inertly from his hand. His smile, so genuine and carefree an instant before, faded, leaving a rictus of confusion and growing alarm. His eyes, the same brown and kind eyes of his mother, jumped from Laura, who continued crying silently with her gaze lost, to Clara, who seemed to have shrunk, diminished and gray against the marble counter, and finally fixed on me. "Dad," his voice was barely a hoarse whisper. What's happening? Have you gotten sick?" The concern in his tone, authentic and immediate, directed toward me, the useless old man, made a new shiver of pain and rage run through me. Even now, his first instinct was to protect me, and they had wanted to steal that from me. They had wanted to turn that nobility into a burden. "I'm not sick, Javier," I replied, and my voice sounded strangely serene, like the calm that precedes a devastating storm. "I am simply fed up." Clara emitted a choked sound, an animal whimper. Laura brought her hands to her mouth, containing a sob. Javier frowned, his confusion deepening. Fed up? Fed up with what? His gaze swept the kitchen again, looking for clues, stopping at the open folder on the counter, at the scattered papers. What is all that? Has something happened with the bank? With the house? Yes. I nodded slowly. Something has happened with the house. With the house. With the car. With the vacation. With everything. I paused, letting my words settle. I looked directly at Clara, challenging her to speak, to deny it. Your mother-in-law and your wife were having a very interesting conversation while you weren't here. About me. Javier blinked. About you? Yes. About the useless old man. About the burden that I am for you. About how exhausting it is for you to have to take care of me. About how much Laura deserves a life without a father-in-law getting in the way. Each word was a knife that I wielded, and I saw how it dug not only into them, but into my own son, whose face was slowly decomposing, paling, while horror took hold of his features. It was even suggested, very kindly of course, that my place should be a residence. No, Laura screamed, finally finding her voice, which was a torn shriek. Javi, please don't listen to him. He's taking everything out of context. Context, I replied, without taking my gaze off Javier. What context does the word hindrance need, Laura? Or useless old man? I heard them clearly, from the terrace. There's no context that sweetens contempt. Javier dropped the bag of ice cream on the floor. The noise of the plastic containers hitting the tile was absurdly loud. He took a hesitant step toward his wife. Laura, he said, and his voice was charged with painful disbelief. Tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't say that. Laura couldn't hold his gaze. She broke into uncontrolled crying, shaking her head, but not in negation, but in pure anguish. It was as eloquent a confirmation as any word. Javier's expression transformed. Confusion became a disappointment, so deep it seemed to physically bend his shoulders. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward his mother-in-law. His gaze hardened. And you, Clara, he told her, and his tone was cold, a tone I had never heard him use. Let me guess, it was you. She couldn't. He pointed to Laura with a head movement. She loves him. It was you. Clara, cornered, tried to recover a hint of her facade. She straightened, although she trembled like a leaf. Javier, dear, this is a misunderstanding, a private conversation. Taken out of proportion. Your father is sensitive. He's taken everything personally. Shut up, Javier roared, and the outburst was so violent and unexpected that even I shuddered. Don't say another word. Don't insult my father by calling him sensitive. Answer me. Did you call him useless old man? Yes or no? Javier's shout resonated in the kitchen, drowning out even the hum of the refrigerator. Clara shrank, defeated. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, looking away toward the floor. Javier closed his eyes for an instant, as if receiving a physical blow. When he opened them, there was contained fury in them, but also heartbreaking pain. My God, he murmured, in his house. After everything he's done for, he interrupted himself, swallowing. His gaze fell on the open folder. He approached the counter and took the first paper he saw. The villa rental contract. He scanned it quickly. His face was pale marble. And this, what is this? Reality, son, I said softly. The reality they enjoyed while they despised me. Show him. Javier took the next document. The car invoice. Then another. The shopping receipt. He turned pages and pages, each one irrefutable proof of my authorship in that luxury paradise. His breathing became increasingly choppy. Finally, his fingers found the paper that would change everything. The statement with the transfer of 180,000 euros. He read it once, twice, his lips moving silently, repeating the figures, the recipient's name, Clara Mendoza Suarez. His hand began to tremble. He raised his gaze to me, and for the first time since it all began, I saw something more than pain in his eyes. Shame. An abysmal shame. "Dad," he managed to articulate, his voice broken. You paid for this. The premises. The boutique. Why? Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you asked me to, Javier," I replied, with a sudden weariness that overwhelmed me. "Remember? You came to my house 6 months ago. You were devastated. You told me that Clara was on the verge of ruin, that she had made foolish investments, that she had debts everywhere, that the boutique was her last hope, but she didn't have the capital. You couldn't help her, not with that amount. You asked me, you begged me to help you, to do it anonymously, so no one would ever know, especially Clara, so as not to hurt her pride. You said Laura wouldn't be able to bear the shame if she found out about her mother's situation." I paused, observing how each word was another nail in the coffin of his happiness. "So I did it. I pulled strings. My manager took care of everything, like a silent investor interested in her project. And you took the credit. You told them it was a bonus, a spectacular bonus." Javier let out a choked gasp. He leaned with both hands on the counter, as if his legs were failing him. He couldn't look at me. "My God," he murmured. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry. I just wanted. You wanted to help. I finished for him. You wanted to protect your family. I understand. I wanted the same thing." My gaze rested again on Clara, who seemed to want to disappear. "But it seems our definition of family is different." Javier straightened up suddenly. His pain transformed into pure and directed anger. He turned toward Clara, and the paper with the transfer crumpled in his closed fist. "And you?" He spat at her, his voice trembling with rage. "You, receiving this, living here, eating his food, with his money paying your debts, and daring to call him useless old man, to suggest he's a burden? Do you have any idea what a burden is, Clara? Do you have any idea of the burden you've been for all of us? For Laura, who worried about your nonsense. For me, who had to go beg my father for help to get you out of the hole. And for him, who couldn't even have the pleasure of you thanking him." Clara was crying now, loud and desperate sobs, but they no longer provoked pity. They seemed like the theatrical performance of someone who had been caught red-handed. "I didn't know," she whimpered. "I didn't know." "That makes it even worse," Javier roared. "It means your ingratitude is natural, genuine. You're he searched for the word, but didn't find it, or didn't want to say it. He spat on the floor, near her feet. "You're exactly what I always thought you were, a miserable and vain woman." "Javi, stop," Laura implored, trying to grab his arm. "She's my mother." Javier freed himself from her touch brusquely. "And he is my father," he shouted, pointing at me with a head movement. "The man who has given us everything. The man who gave you a fairy tale wedding. The one who paid the down payment for your first apartment. The one who is there, always in silence, without asking for anything in return. And you let her spit on him like that. You listened and did nothing. Nothing, Laura." Laura backed away as if he had hit her. The accusation, just and terrible, left her breathless. She had no defense. I tried. Try what? To silence her. "It's too little, too late." Javier breathed deeply, trying to calm himself, but the trembling of his hands betrayed the inner storm. "I want you to leave, both of you." A deathly silence fell over the kitchen. Even Clara stopped crying. "What?" Laura stammered. "For you to leave," Javier repeated, with glacial coldness. "Right now. Pack your bags, and go. Take the car. Go back to Madrid. Or go wherever you want, but get out of this house." "Javi, no," Laura screamed, clinging to his shirt. Please, the children. They'll wake up. We can't. The children will stay with me, he declared, with a firmness that admitted no reply. I don't want them near this toxicity. Not now. They're my children, Laura protested, hysterical. And my father is my father, he replied. And today you chose to remain silent. You chose to allow this. Now face the consequences. Clara, suddenly, found a last vestige of pride. She dried her tears angrily. Let's go, Laura, she said, with a hoarse but firm voice. We're not going to beg where we're not wanted. She looked at Javier with disdain. You think you're very big, throwing out your wife and your mother-in-law, but you're just a child, defending his daddy. It was the final mistake. Javier said nothing. He simply took a step forward, grabbed the knife that was still on the tomato cutting board, and stabbed it furiously into the marble counter, mere centimeters from Clara's hand. The metal vibrated with a sharp and threatening sound. Clara let out a choked scream and backed away, terrified. Get out, Javier said, with a voice so low and dangerous that even I shuddered. From this kitchen, now. And don't speak, don't say another word, or I swear to God that what comes next won't please you. Clara, white as ash, obeyed. With her head down, she stumbled out of the kitchen and ran up the stairs toward the bedrooms. Her footsteps echoed like drumbeats. Laura looked at Javier, seeking clemency, but only found a wall of ice. With a desperate sob, she ran out after her mother. We were left alone in the kitchen, Javier and I. The hum of the refrigerator filled the void again. He still had his back toward me, gripping the edge of the counter with tense shoulders. I felt incredibly tired, empty. The taste of revenge was ash in my mouth. Javier, I called softly. He didn't turn around. His back shuddered. I'm sorry, Dad, he murmured, and his voice was charged with infinite anguish. I'm sorry for everything. For her, for Laura, for putting you in this situation, for not having the balls to tell the truth from the beginning. You don't have to apologize, I said, not for me. Finally he turned around. His face was pale, marked by fatigue and pain. His eyes reddened, looked at me. Yes, I do, he insisted, because this is my fault. My cowardice led us to this. He pointed to the folder. All this, I should have, I don't know, something, anything. You chose to protect your wife, I said. It's understandable, but not at your expense, he exclaimed, hitting his chest with his fist. Never at your expense. You are my father. The tears he had contained finally flowed. They rolled silently down his cheeks. It was a heartbreaking spectacle, seeing my son, my strong and adult child, cry like that for me, for the pain they had caused me. I walked toward him. My steps were slow, heavy. I put a hand on his shoulder. It was tense as a rock. Listen to me, Javier, I said, looking into his eyes. What happened today is horrible, but it happened. Now we have to decide what we do from here. He shook his head, overwhelmed. I don't know, Dad, I don't know what to do. The children, Laura. God, the children come first, I affirmed firmly, always. Whatever happens between you and Laura, that's your business. You'll have to talk about it, calmly, with time. But now the damage is done. They will leave. It's the right thing. And you? He asked, with a child's voice. Will you leave too? Will you abandon us? His question broke my soul. In his voice there was a genuine fear of being left alone, of losing me. No, I replied, squeezing his shoulder. No, son, I'm staying. If you ask me to, I'm staying. But not as a burden, not as a hindrance. I'm staying as your father and as my grandchildren's grandfather. Nothing more, and nothing less. Javier nodded, swallowing. Please, he whispered. Stay. Don't leave me alone with this. I won't leave you, I promised. At that moment, a small sound made us turn toward the kitchen door. In the doorway, barefoot and in his Superman pajamas, stood Lucas, my 8-year-old grandson. His hair was tousled from sleep, and he rubbed his eyes with his fists. He looked at both of us, at his father crying, at me with my hand on his shoulder, at the papers scattered on the floor, at the spilled ice cream bag. Dad, he said, with a sleepy and worried little voice. Grandpa, why are you crying? Did something bad happen? Javier and I looked at each other. The innocence of that question, in the middle of the disaster that we adults had created, was like a ray of light in the darkest of storms. My heart shrank. The revelation had ended. The confrontation, too. Now began the most difficult thing, picking up the pieces. And we had to do it in front of the innocent and confused eyes of a child who just wanted to know why his father was crying. Javier dried his tears with his shirt sleeve and tried to force a smile. No, sweetheart, he lied, and his voice sounded raspy. Nothing bad has happened. Come here. Lucas advanced hesitantly and hugged his father's leg. Javier surrounded him with his arm, pressing him against himself. I looked at the scene, my son and my grandson, united. I looked at the remains of broken happiness scattered around the kitchen. I looked toward the hallway, where Laura and Clara had fled. And I knew, with absolute and painful certainty, that the vacation had ended, and that life, the real one, with all its crudeness and pain, had just begun again. The tension in the kitchen dissipated, replaced by a dense and exhausting weight. Lucas, clinging to his father's leg, looked with enormous and confused eyes, capturing the emotional electricity that still vibrated in the air. The ice cream was melting in a sticky puddle on the floor, an absurd and perfect metaphor for the happiness that had melted away. Come on, soldier, said Javier, with a voice that tried to be firm but still trembled slightly. He lifted Lucas in his arms, clinging to him like an anchor. It's time for an emergency ice cream. Grandpa, can you? I nodded, understanding. He needed a moment alone with his son, a parenthesis of normalcy in the middle of the chaos. While Javier took a couple of ice creams from the freezer, ignoring the melted ones, and sat with Lucas on the living room sofa, I stayed in the kitchen. I listened to the muffled sobs and the noise of suitcases being dragged from upstairs. Clara and Laura were leaving. The sound should have filled me with satisfaction, but I only felt a deep and bitter sadness. I picked up the scattered papers, the folder that had changed everything. Each sheet was a reminder not only of my money, but of my silence, of my complicity in the lie that had fed the monster of Clara's contempt. I was also to blame. Suddenly the sound of a car, starting furiously, tore through the afternoon. A violent door slam, the screech of tires on gravel, and then silence. They were gone. Javier appeared in the kitchen doorway, with Lucas already falling asleep again in his arms, exhausted by the emotions and sugar. They're gone, he said, without any inflection. It was a fact, not a relief. Yes, I confirmed. I'm going to put him to bed, he murmured, referring to Lucas. Then we'll come down and talk. While he went upstairs, I headed to the living room. The light of dusk was beginning to tint the sky orange and purple, bathing the room in melancholic and beautiful light. I sat on the sofa, feeling the weight of my 78 years like never before. The house, now truly silent, seemed enormous and empty. After a while, Javier came down. He had washed his face, but his eyes were still swollen and red. He collapsed on the sofa, next to me, burying his head in his hands. God, Dad, what have I done? He whispered. What you had to do, I said, although deep down I wondered the same thing. I threw out my wife, the mother of my children. He raised his gaze, desperate. And now what? How do I explain this to Martina when she wakes up? How do I rebuild this? You don't have to rebuild anything alone, I replied firmly. I'm here. But you shouldn't be in the middle of this mess, he exclaimed, frustrated. You should, I don't know, enjoy your retirement, read, travel, not deal with your son's dramas. You are my son, I replied, as if that explained everything. And for me, it did. In that moment of painful silence, the front door bell rang. A sharp, insistent bell. Javier and I looked at each other, alarmed. Who could it be? We weren't expecting anyone. Had Clara forgotten something? Had Laura come back, repentant? Javier got up, frowning. Stay here, Dad. He crossed the living room and opened the front door. I, from the sofa, couldn't see who it was, but I could see Javier's reaction. His body tensed immediately. He didn't say hello or who is it. He remained mute, rigid, blocking the entrance. Javier, said a voice from outside, a female voice, deep, serene, and with a hint of authority that pierced the distance to my ears with brutal clarity. It's been a long time. It wasn't Clara. It wasn't Laura. You? Was all Javier managed to say. His tone was a mixture of absolute incredulity and fear. Yes, me. Are you going to let me in? It's hot outside. Javier, as if moved by a spring, stepped aside. And then the woman entered the living room, and the world stopped. She was tall, slender, dressed in a cream-colored linen pantsuit, impeccable, that screamed elegance and money. She wore her black hair, with some silver strands, pulled back in a severe bun that accentuated high cheekbones and a strong jaw. Her skin was bronzed by the sun, and in her hands she carried fine leather gloves and a purse that I recognized instantly. It was from a brand that only the highest strata of society could afford, but it wasn't her appearance that left me breathless. It was her face. A face I hadn't seen in almost 40 years, but that was burned into my memory. A face that belonged to another time, another life, a love I thought was dead and buried under layers and layers of duty, family, and time. Elena. Elena Montenegro. My ex-wife, Javier's mother. The woman I divorced in 1989, in the most brutal and painful way, after she, driven by an ambition I couldn't follow, abandoned us both to pursue a ruthless career in the world of international finance. The woman who, according to rumors, had done so well that she had become a legend, a ghost that was spoken of in whispers in power circles. Javier remained paralyzed at the entrance, white as the wall. I couldn't move. My lungs refused to function. It was as if a ghost had crossed the threshold, but a flesh and blood ghost, impeccably dressed and with a presence that completely filled the room. She looked at me, her eyes, the color of whiskey, the same ones Javier had inherited, looked me up and down, without surprise, as if she had expected to find me exactly there. A splinter of something, nostalgia, sadness, triumph, crossed her gaze too quickly to catch. Arturo, she said, and my name on her lips sounded like an echo from another life. You still cut a good figure. I didn't know what to say. My mind was a whirlwind of impossible questions. What was she doing here? How had she found us? Why now, after 4 decades of absolute silence? It was Javier who broke the spell, with a voice that was a thread of what it normally was. What are you doing here, mother? The word mother sounded forced and strange in his mouth. Elena smiled, a small and calculated smile that didn't reach her eyes. What a way to receive a mother who hasn't seen her only son in, how long? 15 years? The last time was at that uncomfortable dinner in Madrid, I think. Her tone was light, but each word was a poisoned dart. I've been traveling. I was in Marrakesh, And then suddenly I felt the need to see you, to see both of you. Her gaze rested on me again. Digital traces are wonderful, you know. A luxury rental in an exclusive area, in the name of Arturo Montenegro. It wasn't difficult to find the address. Have you been spying on us? Javier asked, with a hint of horror. Don't call it spying. Call it family interest, she replied, removing her gloves with slow and deliberate movements. Her hands were perfectly manicured, with a sapphire ring the size of a walnut. And wow, it seems I arrived at an interesting moment. Her nose for drama, for weakness, had always been exceptional. Her eyes swept the room, capturing the ice cream remains, the palpable tension, the absence of Laura and the children. Marital problems, Javier. I'm very sorry. Although from what I remember, the Montenegros don't have much luck in love, right, Arturo? Her sarcasm was a sharp knife. Javier clenched his fists. You have no right to come here and what? Ask about my family? She cut him off, raising a perfectly lined eyebrow. I think I have every right in the world. After all, I'm your mother. And she made a dramatic pause, letting her words settle. The main shareholder of Montenegro and Sons. The air was expelled from my lungs as if I had been hit. What? I managed to articulate, getting up from the sofa. My legs were trembling. Impossible, said Javier, shaking his head forcefully. The company is ours, Dad's and mine. He's the majority shareholder. I have 30%. Really? Elena took an envelope of fine vellum from her purse. Check your memorandum, son, and yours, Arturo. 18 months ago, a shell company based in Luxembourg began buying stock packages silently, through various front men, small percentages here and there, nothing alarming. Until 3 months ago, they exceeded your participation, Arturo. She looked at me, and I finally saw triumph openly in her eyes. I am that company, and right now, I own 51% of the company you founded with your sweat, our company. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. I leaned on the back of the sofa dizzy. Montenegro and Sons, the construction company I had founded from scratch, the fruit of my entire life's work, the legacy I wanted to leave Javier, was hers, from her, from the woman who had abandoned everything. Why? Javier gasped, who seemed on the verge of a panic attack. Why would you do something like that? Because I can, she replied, with a terrifying simplicity, and because I always knew you would end up needing me. Javier, she pointed at me with disdain, gave you a small, family, comfortable company. I can give you an empire, but for that, you have to clean house first. Clean? I asked, finally finding my voice, which sounded hoarse and ancient. Elena looked at me with pity, the worst of all emotions. Yes, Arturo, clean, starting with you. You're a sentimental, a softie. You cling to the past, to an idea of family that is touching, but terribly inefficient. This little domestic crisis proves it. She made a dismissive gesture, encompassing the house. A company isn't run with the heart. It's run with the head, and with power, and I have both. She approached Javier, who instinctively stepped back. Your wife has been unfaithful to you, hasn't she? She asked, with a crudeness that left us both frozen. How? Javier stammered, devastated. Because it's obvious, from the way you talk about her, from the rage that isn't just about today. I've seen the reports. She has a lover, Javier, a partner from that design studio they work with. They've been going on for months. She dropped the bomb with the tranquility of someone commenting on the weather. See, sentimentalism, weakness. If you had had the power, the information, this wouldn't have caught you by surprise. You would have been prepared. You would have counterattacked. Javier collapsed into the nearest chair, burying his face in his hands. He wasn't crying. He seemed broken. The revelation about Laura, added to his mother's appearance and words, was too much. Elena turned toward me. Her expression softened slightly. but not out of compassion, but out of pity. And you, Arturo, my old sea wolf, you've gone soft. You've settled for being the grandpa who pays for vacations. She shook her head. It's a shame. The Arturo I knew, that one would have devoured a woman like Clara before she opened her mouth. That one wouldn't have hidden behind anonymous transfers. That one took what he wanted. That Arturo died when you left. I spat, with more bitterness than I had felt in years. She smiled, a sad and cold smile. No, he just fell asleep, and I've come to wake him up. Both of you. She looked at her son, then at me. You have 24 hours. 24 hours to decide if you want to keep playing business with your family company, or if you want to get on the train I'm going to conduct. A train that's going to destroy all those petty people who have laughed at you, starting with that, Clara, and ending with your frivolous wife, Javier. She approached the table and dropped a white and sober business card with only a name and a phone number. My jet is at Almeria Airport. Tomorrow at this time, it takes off, with or without you. She headed toward the door, put on her gloves. Think about it. The world belongs to the ruthless, my children. It always has. And finally, you have the chance to be so. And with that, she left. The door closed behind her with a soft and definitive click. The silence she left was deafening. Javier and I looked at each other, across the room. Two men shattered by the same woman, at two different times in their lives, and now united again by her particular tsunami. The revelation about Laura was a low blow, a new and fierce pain for Javier. The news that our company was no longer ours was an earthquake that threatened to take away the foundations of my identity. But the most incredible thing, the most epic and unexpected, was the offer itself. Dark, twisted, diabolical, an alliance with the devil, our devil. Javier broke the silence, his voice a hoarse whisper loaded with a fear both new and ancient. What do we do, Dad? We were no longer a father and son trying to overcome a family crisis. We were two partners, two Montenegros, on the edge of the abyss, with Elena's specter offering us wings to fly or to burn. And I, Arturo Montenegro, the useless old man, had 24 hours to decide if I wanted to become the wolf I once was again. Night had fallen completely. Outside, the waves continued hitting the cliffs, but now they sounded different. They no longer sounded like comfort nor indifference. They sounded like a drum roll of war. Epilogue. Has Arturo's journey moved you? Do you think Javier and he will accept Elena's dark offer, or will they find their own path to redemption? The Montenegro family story is far from over. The secrets of the past, the betrayals of the present, and the future of a company at stake, everything is yet to be decided. If this video reaches 10,000 likes, I'll tell part 2 of this story, which is even crazier. Subscribe and watch this story that's appearing on screen right now.